Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to Stratosphere Lounge. I'm your host, Bill Whittle, and it's great to have you back here. Actually, you probably never went anywhere. I'm the one who left, but in any event, it's good to be back. I feel especially bad about last week because I had just been blown out tired on Wednesday, tried to move it to Thursday, and then I just got stuck in the proverbial traffic, and so sorry about that, but we're back. Um, and it is the 16th of January 2019, and still no jetpacks. I'm very bitterly disappointed, is what I am. Hope everybody's been well, and it's good to be here. Um, don't have a whole lot of news. It's super interesting. Um, I did go and talk to. I talked about the Aurora Project thing to a group of little old ladies, um, and and they were the sweetest, the littlest, and the oldest ladies I've ever spoken in front of. And it was, it's not a super wealthy crowd. But we had our little donation envelopes, and I mean, really, really, really old ladies, lovely, lovely people. But honestly, and maybe 35 of them. And out of those 35 little old ladies, we got 23 donation envelopes, and one of them was for $3, which I know some people are disappointed by or mock or disdain, but for me, I was just as touched by that as I could be. But it turned into $709. So even I cannot imagine a more unlikely group of people to go and ask for money for something like video game messaging through 3D graphics. But for that to be, 60%, 65, 70% of the total number of people there actually getting out and writing a check was really nice. So we'll try that again with some other people in the near future and make some deposits. And great. They're actually not from Pasadena. They're from. Took me a second. Sorry, a little slow in the uptake. They're lovely, lovely, lovely people from Canoga Park. And I just couldn't have had a better time. And I find the less I talk about the details of what I want to do, the better the message gets. So there we go. Let's see what else. Got run over by a car yesterday. That was exciting. Um, I went out to get some food. It was raining in LA, and when it rains in LA, people are, well, they just don't know what to do. Um, so I went out to get some food afterwards. It was late at night, and it was about 8:30, I guess. Uh, Late rain in L.A., and this particular place I wanted to pick up the food was at Ventura Boulevard, and there was no parking anywhere. I mean, there was no parking for 2 blocks, 3 blocks in either location. So after driving around for a while, I took a right and headed up the hills towards the Santa Monica Mountains there. One side of Ventura Boulevard, the south side is very hilly. And so I turned up the hill, found a little residential neighborhood, parked pretty close to Ventura Boulevard, get out of the car, got my little umbrella, and I'm walking down the hill. So I'm coming down this hill like this, and Ventura Boulevard is going this way. And I get to the stoplight, and I hit the crosswalk button, and that little spidey sense just went off. Just said, "Be careful crossing the street. It's wet out there." And sometimes people just are not able to stop their cars the way that they would under normal circumstances. So the walk light went on, and the green light came, and so there's traffic coming down the hill from behind me, potential traffic, but the main traffic is on the cross streets on Ventura Boulevard. Look to the left. Is that car going to stop? Absolutely. What about to the right? Yes, that car's already stopped. What about that car coming down the hill behind me? Fine. He's fine. He sees me. He's turning. He's turning. He's turning. He's getting closer. He's getting closer. He's getting closer. He's getting. Jesus Christ, this guy's going to hit me. And I just took a step back, and and I discovered some interesting things that I didn't know about. I discovered that you can have your entire front of your foot run over by a Toyota to the point. I don't mean like just nudged. I mean, like run over, so that the car goes boom, boom, like that, by running over your foot. And that hurts a bit. And the guy was, he was as mortified as I would be if it were me. He just didn't see me. I guess he just didn't see me, but I saw him. Otherwise, the story could have been a little more amusing. But yeah, the car ran right over the front half of my right foot, and it hurt quite a bit. But it didn't hurt bad enough for me to cry or anything, and I just kept doing the Ron Swanson, started limping. And the guy said, "Oh man, are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, you just ran over my foot. That was kind of fun." He says, "Oh, dude, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Are you okay?" I said, "I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine." And he, kept stuck in the street long enough to make sure that I actually, was not going to go down. And I just just limped down the sidewalk to the Berry place. And I clearly remember thinking, better put some weight on it now, because if it's broken and numb, you'll know it now. But it just, over the course of the next half hour, it just started hurting less and less and less, and I forgot all about it. I got home and told Natasha about it, and I took off my sock, and so if this is my foot, and it is, except it's my hand. There's like a diagonal line that goes like this, where you can see that the tire of the car ran over part of the first toe and just pretty much all of the big toe, and it was pretty red, but that's about it. Nothing else happened. So that was fun. It's just important to be careful. I'll never forget this as long as I live. I was in driver's ed in Coral Gables High School in 1976, and we had a bunch of donated cars, and we were learning how to drive in the big parking lot out back of the school. And they had a driver's ed instructor named Mr. Yanagito, I think. Little Italian guy, very small and very, very funny. And he taught me two lessons that I have not forgotten. One of them was, he said, when you come to a stop sign, that means stop. It doesn't mean slow down. And he said, so if I was to walk up with you and start bashing you over the head with this baseball bat, which he kept by his desk, and started just bashing you on the head, and just kept hitting you repeatedly, and you yelled, "Stop, stop, stop," how would you feel if I just slowed down? And I thought, wow, man, that's memorable. And then, and the other thing he said that I never forgot, we were doing some kind of exercise, and he was saying, you just always have to assume that person is going to do the wrong thing, because otherwise your headstone will read, "He was right." And I've had that experience in airplanes too. Clear for takeoff, and you look off to the left, and there's somebody about to land on you, and clear to land, and you look off to the right, and there's somebody who's like merging into the same four dimensions that you want to be in, and it's just a very good habit to just drive and walk and live defensively. Just assume that this person's going to do something stupid, and you'll live, generally speaking, a lot longer, unless they do something really stupid, or you do something stupid too. That's always known to happen. But I do remember when the guy ran over my foot, and the car went tunk tunk. I remember thinking, Jesus, man, what's the matter with you? And then I immediately thought of all the times that I've just plain, it's not a lot of times, but it's enough times to know that sometimes you just don't see things. You just make a mistake. So that's our little civics lesson for the day today. We did have a very interesting couple of days, and that is because we brought, when I say we, I mean I, brought Mr. Scott Ott out from Texas. He spent 2 or 3 days here. Scott I've been working with On Air since 2008, and I suppose most people know he's just the best person I know, unless he's here. And if he's here, which I doubt, but if he is here, please identify yourself, Scott, in which case I'll go back to talking about you the way that I normally should. But he came out for a couple days, and I had no idea that he'd known so much about running a business and fundraising and management and task completion and all of that stuff. And we just had a great time. Went up to a jazz club with Natasha on when he got here on Sunday night. And we got more work done on Monday than I've done in this office in 2 months. And he's also been helping poor, incredibly, unbelievably loyal and hardworking Shelley, who's been just manning the fire hoses here. And so things are going on really well. And we have an interesting set of ideas about what we're going to do. I'd really like to basically get him to kind of help run the company, because somebody ought to do it. And it's nice to talk to the Stratolungers, because it's it's pretty much an in crowd, and we were trying to think about what we wanted to do. And when Scott came to talk about kind of new directions and just sort of getting this thing off on the right foot, his first words out of his mouth were, love the members. And I thought, yeah, that's really pretty much true. So after 10 years of doing this and something close to 100 million views, it's not so much that I need the views anymore. I just, if we're going to keep the electricity on here, I need people to pay for the views. And so we ran into the problem that we have with this company, which is we have a membership-based business model, and the goal of the membership is to make sure that everything gets seen by as many people as possible for free. And that is a little bit contradictory. But we came up with what I thought was just a fantastic solution, and it was mostly Scott's idea. So what we're going to be doing basically is that we're going to, BillWhittle.com is going to be essentially and he got this idea from Dave Rubin. This is what we're talking about doing anyway. It's going to be, the whole site is going to be members only. And if you're not a member, then at Dave Rubin's site, you go to Dave Rubin's splash page and it says become a member or view. And if you go to view, you go to his YouTube page, and you see all of the videos he has at YouTube. But here's what we decided to do, and I think this is actually a really, really, really great idea, because I think it works on both sides of the equation. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to continue to do at least 10 shows a week, 5 right angles and 5 Bill Whittle Nows. And those are generally running about 15 minutes, generally 15 to 20 minutes. And those will be available for you to view as a member. And if you're not a member, what you will get is you will get directed to the YouTube page. And this is the part that's actually brilliant, I think. Scott did a test cut down of a 15-minute segment, cut it down to 3 minutes, put a little music underneath it, and some flash titles on the points. And so what he ended up doing was he ended up taking a 15-minute show with a fairly detailed 15-minute show with a fairly detailed analysis. He pulled the best 3 minutes of the answer out there, and that's going to be available to everybody for free. And a 3-minute show will do better business on YouTube than a 15-minute show. So at the same time, what it does is we basically say here's the best of the stuff, and here's the primary message from the content, from the right angle, and from this and that, and that gets shared wide because it's shorter, it's a little more manageable, and at the same time, you actually get something for your membership. You get the whole thought processes, and the one that I thought was very interesting lately on Bill Whittle Now was the one about the national parks, where Scott challenged me on something, and I came up with an answer. And then, as I thought about it more, I changed my mind. And that kind of thing is fun to see. So that's real easy to do. Scott also had some interesting ideas about things like a right angle, for example. Right Angle's a three-panel show, and Right Angle's a three-panel show because Trifecta was a three-panel show, and Trifecta was a three-panel show because they were showing off their technology in 2008, where we were doing 3 live streams in little boxes. And what Scott pointed out was Right Angle, there's no reason why it has to be in 3 boxes. In other words, you shouldn't have to be looking at Steve and Scott while I'm talking, or looking at me and Scott while Steve's talking, or whatever. And so we're going to recut that show, and it'll give it a lot more visual dynamics, and we'll do some pull-ups too. You know, we'll actually edit for content, if you can imagine such a thing. And that should make it a lot more interesting. And I think that kind of thing is just, you know, with really brilliant. So there's that. We want to try and improve the quality of the actual video image coming out. This is pretty good the way it is. Bill Whittle Now is shot just over there. In fact, since it's lit, there you go. So as you can see from this extremely valuable setup here, Bill Whittle Now is shot in front of a TV screen, and that's nice because I can change the background, but it does 2 things. It limits the size of the frame. In other words, I have to have the camera. You can see the camera right there, kind of on the tripod behind the lights. It means the camera has to be close enough to get me, because if the camera's any further back on a wider shot, we see the edges of the TV screen. And the other thing, and the much more annoying, why can't I get there we go. And the much more annoying thing about this setup is that because it's a TV screen, you can actually see it from here. Those 2 lights have to be up really high, because if they're any lower, then they get the reflection on the TV screen comes right back at them. So in the fullness of time, hopefully not too long, the next, I don't know, somewhere in a month or so, hopefully, we're going to just take that TV screen down. We're going to put a big Bill Whittle Now on the wall, make it a practical set like they have over at Daily Wire, which we went to visit. Jeremy Boring had took time out and had Scott and I over there, and the quality of the lighting is fantastic on Daily Wire, and the practical sets, you know, the actual physical sets, means that you can come back further. And so if we had a practical, you know, Bill Whittle Now on the wall back there in the alcove there, we could actually shoot it like the Firewall, shoot it at 4K, and shoot a 4K wide shot where you'd see some lights and the desk and everything and the practical thing. And then we could go in and do a digital push to what was approximately the same shot as we have now on Bill Whittle Now, but because it's shooting 4K and you're outputting it either 720 or 1080, you don't lose any resolution. And we just think that would look much better. So we're all real excited about that, and Scott really was just extraordinary. We had a great time. Went up to Vibrato Jazz Club and listened to some jazz music, and Tasha and Scott and I, and had ourselves just a dandy time. So I am looking forward to implementing these changes, but we're not going to tell you when until we're ready to do them, because that would be nuts. Okay, so I'm going to chew through a couple questions here. I know Eric and Blake said that it has to be a long one because I missed last week, and this has to be penance. And I think it's pretty clear by now that most everything I do is intended in one way or another to make sure Eric is happy. But I'm not going to be able to spend a super long time here tonight. So let's start knocking down some questions. And I still have a number of thumbnails and things like that to do. We need to get these shows out the door 10 a week consistently for the last 4 months now on the Bill Whittle Nows as well. So that makes me happy. There we go. I am now trying to scroll down the Facebook page, which is not... Oh, there it goes. Took a moment. Hey, there's the questions. So let's have a look at what we've got here. I'm going to try and move this just a little bit over so I don't get quite so much glare. There we go. Um, Brian Yoder has, again, I'm just going through the comments as they're listed. This is listed by most relevant, but I like this first question. The first question is Brian Yoder, boycott Gillette, question mark. As it turns out, um, and the forums are coming back to the question that somebody. I'm sorry, just sometimes I'll glance over there. We're going to go back to Discus with the comments available right there on each one of the listings and stuff. Anyway, Brian Yoder has got a little thing there, a hashtag boycott Gillette, and reason I'm interested in that is because. Scott asked me a question about this today on Bill Whittle Now this morning at Dark 30. We started shooting at about 6 o'clock a.m. Today, and I haven't seen it yet, but Gillette has basically gone woke and has basically said that that all of their advertising and so on now are going to be designed to eliminate the entire idea of toxic masculinity. And toxic masculinity is a term used by beta males and feminists to describe masculinity. That's what toxic masculinity is to them. They think that toxic masculinity is rape and assault, but the actual terms for rape and assault are rape and assault. This is not masculinity. There's no question that most of the rape, for all of the rape essentially, and most of the assault is committed by males. There's no question about that, but that's not masculinity. And what Gillette is doing is they are basically kowtowing to the PC police and saying that we're no longer going to be promoting, traditional masculine values, which is, again, a beta male and feminist way of saying, since we can't do these things, we're going to make them seem like psychological pathologies. And when I say can't do them, I mean not capable of doing them. It is yet another step on the suicide of companies that have decided to go down the social justice warrior road. ESPN and the NFL both decided that they would take a political position that would endear them to Berkeley, studies professors and Antifa hooligans and radical feminists. They decided that that was the political tone they were going to take at the expense of the political tone of people who would just like to watch some football games and not have to be subjected to this bombardment all the time. And this is an interesting business decision because while they're changed their tone and their content to please Berkeley professors, at the expense of regular working class Americans, as it turns out, Berkeley professors don't actually watch a lot of football. So, one of the things that I saw that's related to this was came out last week, and I don't know if it's the American Psychiatric Association or something, but basically, what we consider to be masculinity is now being defined as a psychological aberration. It's pretty soon it'll be a disorder. They were saying these traditional ideas of masculinity forcing young boys to not cry like we forced them, but advising them that it's probably better not to cry, at least not cry now, maybe later, but right now there's an emergency going on, and if you're over there sobbing, then who's going to do what needs to be done? That is harming them psychologically and causing them deep emotional stress. And we find that kind of traditional masculinity provides all kinds of other pathological behaviors, which were identified by these psychologists as risk-taking behavior, because God knows you wouldn't want to take a risk, not today when everything's perfect. No reason to take a risk today when nobody dies and nothing bad ever happens. So risk-taking behavior is defined as a psychological pathology generated by toxic masculinity. I'm not making this up. I wish I was. Actually, I don't. I'm glad they're doing this. What else? Aggressive behavior, which they're defining as basically putting your own personal desires and having personal desires and then wanting to go and achieve those personal desires. That's another. Psychological condition, a psychological impairment or pathology that's a result of this traditional view of masculinity and so on. And so you have to ask yourself a couple questions about this position on the part of Gillette and NFL and let's add one more because I was doing a little studying about this. Sometimes I find all I watch is YouTube and user-generated content. I have not watched any network TV in a long time, but I try to see as much YouTube stuff as I possibly can. And I've been paying more and more attention to watching video game commenters. Now, I'm not going to go into the whole thing again, so everybody relax, take a breath. We're not going to go down that whole road again. But let me tell you why I think this is interesting. By me listening to what the video gamer community is saying, I am listening to the people who are going to be running the country someday. I'm listening to the cohort that is actually voting now and will continue to vote for decades, assuming that the country lives long enough for that. And so it is important to get a sense of what the future is bringing in terms of political attitudes. And I'm not aware, I'm not saying that there's no one else doing it, I'm just saying I'm not aware of anyone else who is in this space. I don't know of anybody else in the conservative movement who's looking 20 years downstream or 10 years downstream. I see people fighting battles now. I don't see anybody looking at what's coming. So here's what's interesting about what's coming. I've spent some time talking about how generally left-wing millennials are leaving society and going to the world of the computer games so they can escape left-wing politics and be heroes. I've talked about the fury and the anger and the rage generated by the left's destruction of Star Wars, destruction of Star Wars through feminism and through so you've got the whole Admiral Purple Hair or whatever, Admiral Akbar, who's actually an interesting character, just he's blown away into the void and we don't even know he's gone until somebody says he's gone. Thanks. So we know that fighter pilots are supposed to control their out-of-control emotions and not go out and actually fight the enemy. The thing to do is to go back to their cabin because the women have all this figured out. And when it turns out that brilliant plan conceived of by Admiral What's-Her-Name and Princess, Princess, had some work done, when that results in the essential destruction of the rebellion, we're still told that the idea of going out there and fighting evil in a fighter plane and being outnumbered horribly and committing acts of bravery and daring, which is kind of a toxic masculine kind of thing to do as a general rule. So they're mad about that. But let me tell you a little bit about the latest thing that I see that they're mad about. There are a number of game titles that are called AAA titles, and they're called AAA titles because they're put out by the biggest studios, the biggest developers, generally like a game releasing company like Activision or Electronic Arts or Bethesda. I'm not so sure about Bethesda, but take Electronic Arts, which is probably the most despised company in America today. What they do is they develop games, they put money into games, and then they sell the games, but they generally farm the games out to development studios. And one of the, I may be wrong about these, I'm pretty sure I'm right, but somebody will correct me if I'm wrong. So EA has put out a series called Battlefield, which was pretty successful. It's a sort of a challenger to the Call of Duty series, which are all first-person shooters that allow young men and women to vicariously experience combat, and sometimes pretty vicariously. I have had experiences in those kind of games where I was just plain terrified. So here's what happened. They made these Battlefield games, and they did very, very well. And I'm rounding the numbers, but they're not terribly far off. A couple years ago, they released a game called Battlefield 1, which was a World War I shooter, which has not really done very much before. And that did very, very well. And already they were starting to put the developer, DICE, I think, was starting to put their PC stamp on things even back 2 years ago with Battlefield 1, because you were seeing not just like occasional screenshots. The artwork was featuring like black soldiers in World War I. And people were saying, listen, we don't have any problem with black soldiers. We deal with black soldiers in Halo and all of these feature set games and in all the fantasy games. It's not that. It's just, it's a little odd to see, the World War II trenches filled with black soldiers, because generally speaking in France, there weren't a whole lot of black soldiers there. And the response of the studio was, well, as it turned out, you ignorant racist, there were black soldiers serving in World War I, so go stuff your racism somewhere else, to which people have replied, while it is true there were black soldiers serving in World War I, they were serving in Africa, and so on. But with that said, it wasn't too intrusive, and Battlefield 1 did really well and made a lot of money, and I want to say it was $3.5 billion, something like that, 4 almost. That's a pretty big deal. Now, you let 2 more years or 3 more years of social justice pressures accrue, and you come to the release of Battlefield 5. Now, Battlefield 5 is a World War II shooter, and highly anticipated World War II shooter, because the one thing you can say about the Battlefield games are their graphics are unparalleled. They're masterpieces. But the release I really wish I thought of it to tee it up. This is the problem with not knowing what the questions are going to be before I take them. But if you get a chance, look this up. It's really quite funny. I'm sure somebody will post it in the comments section and probably in the YouTube section comments as well. If you look at the release trailer for Battlefield 5, it's essentially about the Western Front in World War II. It's basically the American army fighting the Nazis. And the release trailer showing you the incredible epic gameplay of that Battlefield 5 was going to consist of, featured a woman, not U.S. soldiers, a woman in kind of resistance kind of clothes, and she's backing up across a field, and she's got a machine gun, and there are these Tiger tanks coming through the walls, and she's ducking around them, and then she gets up, and there's a Nazi there, and she ends up killing this guy with a cricket bat with barbed wire wrapped around it, and just bashes this guy's head in, covered with blood. And as the woman's standing there, you realize that it's not only a 5'2" woman, it's a 5'2" woman with a prosthetic arm, with a World War II era wooden prosthetic arm with a club, with which she has beaten the daylights out of a 200-pound SS guy, because Democrats. And when the fans saw this trailer, they really said, this has gone far enough. The whole idea of this reinforces my entire operational theory. The quality that video games are most prized for, no matter what the video game is, the quality that is most prized in any game is what we term immersion. And immersion is the sense that the environment is not necessarily real enough or accurate enough, but it's compelling enough and it's consistent enough so that we lose ourselves in the game. We're no longer sitting at a table in our parents' basements looking at a screen. We are now driving over the sand dunes on Daymar, or we're walking through a trench in Flanders, or we're doing whatever we're doing, but we're inside the game. We're not looking at the game. We're in the game. It is the entire goal of a game, especially a video game, Immersion is what a well-run Dungeons and Dragons game did, but I think with the power of video graphics, far more powerful. In Dungeons and Dragons, what you're trying to do is have a bunch of people who are sitting around a table with dice and things in their laps find a way to mentally teleport their consciousness to a world where they are inside a dungeon fighting dragons with magic spells and powerful swords. In That's what immersion is, and that's why people play games. They want to get away from this world. They want to go into a different world, whatever that world may be. So here's where it gets really interesting. So, needless to say, the fans are saying a disabled woman who's missing an arm is going to be the featured character in the release of the. It's not just like a cutaway shot or one of many. This is what you're going to give us in order to sell the game. And now we're down to the brass tacks because the studio knew that this was going to piss people off. Knew it, and they did it anyway. They basically spit in the face of the fans on purpose. And it's not just a question of them thinking, hey, it would be nice if everybody had a better attitude towards inclusion of women and disabled people. That's not their attitude. Their attitude is, I think it's better to have to destroy historical accuracy and immersion in order to make a point I want to make about female empowerment and empowering the disabled. And it's not like I'm trying to educate you on this. It's that you will do what I say you're going to do, you ignorant, racist, homophobe, supremacist. And then you begin to see what these people actually think of us. And as it turns out, it's not very high opinion. So the controversy starts to grow, and I can give you a couple of little snapshots from this because it applies to the whole culture. This is just a really good example of what's happening along lines of the Gillette campaign. So there's some blowback from the fans saying, my kind of understanding was that when you were, parachuting into Normandy with 101st Airborne, that it wasn't a 50% female crew, and hearing female voices in combat is pulling me out of this game, because if I wanted to play a game where there are female characters as female characters, I'll play Halo, or I'll play something in the future, or I'll play Fortnite or something like that. But I'm not. But World War II is where I'm trying to be here now in my head, and every time I hear this voice, it just takes me out of the game. The response of the studio was, "You woman-hating bigot." The pretty much verbatim response. The studio director of this game said something that was so perfect in terms of how these people think. It was just such a perfect statement. And it tells you everything you need to know about these people. First of all, I'll tell you the statement. I'm paraphrasing, but it's pretty close to this. So the guy who's developing Battlefield 5 and who's including all of these female characters and disabled characters and all the rest of this stuff in an actual historical background says, well, let me tell you about the whole female character thing. We showed a test version of this game to my little daughter. First of all, I don't believe you, but this is what he said. And we showed her a test version of the game, and my little 7-year-old daughter said to me, "Dad, why isn't there anybody in this game that looks like me? I play Fortnite, and there's people in Fortnite that look like me. Why is there nobody in your game who looks like me?" And then the director of the studio said, how am I going to answer a question like that? How am I going to tell my little girl that she can't be a combat soldier in World War II? So that's why we put the female characters in there. And I wasn't the first to comment on this. A number of gamer commenters have talked about this, but basically, a lot of people have said, how am I going to explain this to my daughter? And many people have said, well, here's one way you could do it. Honey, this game took place in 1944, 1945, and there were no women on the front because way back then, in the days of toxic masculinity, it was pretty much assumed by everybody that young men were going to go out there and get killed so that young women wouldn't have to be killed. That's pretty much what that entire toxic masculinity, and all of those hateful things that I've tried to protect you from. That value system is fortunately gone now. Now you're just as perfectly willing and able to go out there and get yourself blown to atoms as anybody else, except you won't, because we all know that if that actually happened, then we'd go back to this horrible toxic male environment, which basically says the men are going to grab their pitchforks and run towards the lifelong warriors who've been practicing with swords since they were 2, and they're going to run towards those guys on horseback, and they're going to die, slowing them down with the hope that it may allow some of the women and children to get away. And this is what you might have said to your daughter. So when the guy says, how do I explain to my daughter that there are no women characters in this game, therefore we're going to put women characters in the game? First of all, I don't believe him. I just don't believe the story. I don't believe it. But let's just say it happened that way. You could say, well, Chardonnay, this is a historical game, and this is what actually happened. So let's just continue the story. So they came out with that statement. And then once again, the studio said, it's incredible to us that there are some bigots out there who don't understand that women fought in World War II. Uneducated bigots don't understand that there were, in fact, women fighting in World War II, which is basically telling your entire user base you're a racist and a misogynist and a bigot, because the idea that 50% of your band of brothers is actually a band of sisters. It's just not true, and you know it. But the fact that you say something about it means you're not only a bigot, but you're uneducated. To which the player community said, well, there are, in fact, stories of Russian snipers who are females. Some of them did an amazing job. He killed 200-300 guys, some of these Russian snipers. But these are not the stories that you're telling. You're not telling the story of a women's action, women's combat units, which were rare but existed in the Eastern Front. You're injecting this into the Western Front, and it's not real, and it didn't happen. And every time I have this experience of walking up this beach on D-Day and hearing all these women yelling and screaming, I'm no longer on the beach in D-Day. I'm wondering why somebody's trying to force their ideology down my throat. So even though there were actual stories of actual women, and look, I don't know how much of a game this is, but just so we're crystal clear on this, it seemed like virtually every single aircraft that was delivered to Europe for 2 or 3 years was flown there by women in pitch blackness with no navigational aids and no no de-icing systems to speak about. There's incredible stories to be told about this, but this isn't one of them, and it's demeaning to invent stories. But now we're really down to the point. The point is that here's how I think the chain of thinking, such as it is, works. It's part of the progressive. It's not part of the progressive worldview. Whirlpool is probably better. It's not part of it. The entire progressive view of the world is this: the world will be made into what we want it to be made into, and if we want it to be made into something badly enough, then that is what we are going to have happen. The world will follow what we wish it to be, and a bunch of very angry feminists who I am quite sure in most cases, if you asked a typical feminist versus your typical progressive feminist, professional feminist, and you asked your typical church-going conservative housewife, or wife for that matter, forget housewife, businesswoman, whatever. If you asked 100 of each one of these groups about what they thought about their father, you'd get very different responses, and And so I know that this is driven by this psychological neuroses on their part. But as feminists get angry, the fact that males and females are different is not enough for them. The fact that they get to bear children, the fact that they have any number of biological advantages is not enough for them. In their rage and their inferiority, they have to be able to do everything, which means that women cannot just be female characters, and they can't just be things that actually do exist that nobody in the gaming community or I have any problems with, is such things as female fighter pilots, female helicopter pilots. There was an Apache pilot in Iraq who was a woman who was just driving them nuts because she was just killing all. No, it's not that. They have to be able to do everything that men do and essentially do it better, because not only are they as strong and as fast and as tough as men, but they're also considerably smarter and more under control and all the rest of this stuff, more under control. Just think about that for a second. We saw in that Star Wars movie these two women, middle-aged women, who were ice cold and totally emotionally under control in a combat situation, while the men were running around hysterically. At least that's the point that Kathleen Kennedy will have you believe. In my experience in life is things don't work out quite that way. So, the gamer community is starting to get a little upset about this. And then one person wrote something that was really telling, and it was not in an antagonistic way. He wrote the developers of Battlefield 5, and he said, listen, since all of these female characters and stuff are essentially just a skin, you've got a skeleton of a character that's moving, and you can either make it a female character or a male character, that artificial intelligence that runs it and all the ballistics and all the other stuff doesn't care. He said, could we have a switch? Could you put in the game a box that we could check, where if we wanted to, we'd check the historical accuracy box, and in a case like that, then we would just have essentially, white Germans and white primarily white male American forces. And the response to the studio, and this is a direct quote, to the idea of having a checkbox to turn on the reality and to turn off these female soldiers that didn't exist, one of the developers wrote back and said, should we put that box above or below the box that you check for white people only? See what they did there? It's racist and sexist for you to even ask for a reality button. And so here we go. So the reason that they have to go and change the past, the reason that they did this to Battlefield 5 is they can't change the present if they don't change the past. This is the major theme, sub-theme anyway, of 1984 by Orwell, who understood socialism and collectivists and totalitarians very, very well. You can't change the present if you don't go back and change the past, because if you don't change the past is constantly reminding you that things were different. And so, since feminists need to believe that anything, and not just feminists, progressives, since progressives need to believe that if they want something to be true enough, then it will be true, then they must want women to be as strong, as fast, as quick, as tough as men, because they want it to be that case. And since they want it to be that way, that also must be true. And if it's therefore true that women are just as great soldiers, and as we've said 100 times on this show, Scarlett Johansson, who's 5'2" and 100 pounds soaking wet, if she cannot beat up a 220-pound SS guy by herself with her bare fists, then you're saying that such a thing is not possible. And if you're saying that something like that is not possible, you're also saying that there are other things that are not possible. And some of these things that are not possible are things like having free healthcare because healthcare isn't free, and having everybody share things because people don't. And the idea that socialist leaders care about the people when in point of fact they die with $800 million like Fidel Castro, or $4.2 billion like Hugo Chavez's daughter. And see, if you have reality intruding anywhere in the present or in the past, you can't remake the world according to the way you wish it to be, because that pesky reality. gets in the way. And so, if you're going to have a fantasy present, you have to have the same fantasy standards apply to the past. And essentially, it's doing what they do, it's erasing history. They are not just erasing, that'd be one thing. They're rewriting history. And there will be a generation which has already arrived that simply doesn't understand, has no way of knowing that Han shot first, and have no way of knowing that women weren't equal partners on the World War II battlefields, because that's all they've ever seen and all they've ever been allowed to see. So, how does this tie in with Gillette? Well, it ties in like this. Basically, the game studio and EA said, look, we're tired of arguing about this whole female character thing. That's the game. That's the way we're going to deliver the game, and you can either buy it or not buy it. And they had somebody posted it on Twitter, because all the developers are incredibly left-wing. Like I say, which button do you want us to check the white supremacy box there first, or you would? You know. So they had a release party, a private release party for this Battlefield 5 thing, and up on the wall, where they put Battlefield 5 title, and it's kind of the photographic center of the piece. There's all these things, and next to them are all these quotes from pissed off gamers saying feminism is destroying the world, and whatever happened to reality. In other words, at the internal release party for this game, they're openly mocking the players, openly mocking them. And what they're basically doing is saying, we are much more advanced than the people who we are creating this product for. And these poor, stupid, bigoted rubes, and they're not, these poor, uneducated, stupid people who we constantly have to try and educate are just are just not capable of it. So this is the game, and if you don't like it, don't buy it. And guess what happened? They didn't buy it. Battlefield 5 is a quarter of the sales, a third of the sales at the most of Battlefield 1. It's an absolute sales catastrophe. They've twice had to revise their stock, their income projections downward, which caused their stock price to half. And they're mystified. They can't figure out why this happened. It's an absolute mystery. Calling your fan base a bunch of haters and women haters and bigots and uneducated idiots, when in point of fact, they're none of those things. Well, if you don't like it, don't buy the game. Okay, so they didn't. Star Wars said the same thing. They said, hey, look, if you don't like The Last Jedi, that's the Force is female, so there you go. If you don't like it, then just don't go see Solo. And so people didn't. And you would think that this would lead people to see the light and change. But you see, here's where we get to the really interesting stuff. It's not only do the progressives not care that they've destroyed Star Wars and that they've destroyed Battlefield and that they've destroyed Star Trek and others. Not only do they not care that they've destroyed billion-dollar franchises and the deeply held beliefs and affections of hundreds of millions of people. Not only do they not care about that, if you ran a business and you did something to piss off all your customers, you would presumably do something as quickly as you could in the other direction and try and get them back with as little extra pain as possible. But they don't care. So it's like they destroy Star Wars, and then Star Wars goes away, and it's not like now they're sorry or they're going to present an alternative Star Wars. It's just dead. It's gone. It's destroyed. Okay, good. Next, Boy Scouts. We're going to make the Boy Scouts into something so opposed to what the Boy Scouts are about, is that no one will be able to go to the Boy Scouts anymore. Certainly our kids aren't going to the Boy Scouts because we don't have kids. We're wheatgrass drinking Berkeley radicals who have a large number of cats. So we'll destroy the Boy Scouts and we'll replace it with nothing, because it's It's not about changing the Boy Scouts. It's about destroying the Boy Scouts. So we'll destroy the Boy Scouts. And after we destroy the Boy Scouts, we'll destroy the NFL. And we'll destroy ESPN. And we'll destroy everything that doesn't feature our philosophy, because we have to. Because if somebody hears reality transposed against what we're telling them is true, any idiot, even a progressive, can figure out that this whole thing's just a stack of lies perpetuated by people who are deeply neurotic, very seriously flawed in many, many ways, and who are incapable of things that traditional males are capable of, things like courage and coolness under fire and under pressure, things like the ability to be violent when the situation demands it, but not violent when the situation doesn't, to be able to tell the difference between somebody who deserves something and somebody who doesn't, to be able to tell the difference from the weak and the strong, and then be able to have the courage, the physical courage, not the moral courage, the physical courage to go and act. They can't do any of these things, and since they can't do any of these things, they have decided to portray all of this stuff as a pathology and destroy it as deeply and as quickly as they can. So all of this to say that the socialist, self-identified, progressive, Democrat, Bernie-supporting millennial generation is so bloody sick of this. They're so fed up and so angry and so disgusted at it that even without our side doing anything, because we're incapable of doing anything that is, socially relevant, the conservative answer to the pop culture turning left is for us to go, well, and walk away. All right. Well, I'm not doing that, but everybody else is. So Gillette has decided to go down the same road as ESPN and the NFL, down the same road as Battlefield 5, down the same road as Star Wars, down the same road, and telling the people who actually shave that the mere fact that you have to shave your face is an indication that there's something biologically wrong with you, and we're going to do our level best to make sure that the products you use to shave your face, because you got that Y chromosome thing, we're going to do our very best to make sure that you understand that all of your instincts and all of your imperatives and all of the things that you cherish are not only not the things that we cherish, but they're morally despicable, and they are shameful. And we're going to make sure that when you buy our product, we're going to give you a steady dose of what a horrible person you are. Get woke, go broke. Sarah Hoyt described the process. It's roll left and die. You make a decision to go to the far left because the people on the far left make enough noise and generate enough tweets that doesn't matter to anybody. The far left can back Colin Kaepernick to the skies, and the NFL's position should have been, what do we care? These people don't watch football. Maybe we should actually cater to the people that watch football, but they don't do that. They get suckered into this, morality trap, this idea that, this is the future, and no, it's not the future. It's not the future. That's one thing we can be sure of. One thing we can be sure of is that progressivism is not the future, because progressivism's been around since 150 BC, and every time that you let progressives take control of things, people die in large numbers, and that society essentially becomes extinct. So progressivism is not the future. It is the absolute assurance that there will be no future. And when you get into a company like Gillette, Andrew, Gillette is a shaving company that makes razors for men. This is not the kind of company that you would think should or would be taking a position that their customers are savages and jerks and bigots and uneducated, and we're going to do you the favor of telling you what a horrible person you are as you buy our product. So, I think we're really at the point now as a society where even people who are even decent conservative people who are appropriately enough offended by open profanity. I really think we're at the point where if somebody was on a national stage, or if I was in a debate with somebody and they started talking about toxic masculinity, I think we're at the point now where the only real response is, you know what, just F off. Okay, we're done caring. We don't care about your neurotic behavior. Just go F yourself, honestly. At this point, that's all you get from me. Go F yourself. And take the rest of this beta, gamma, and omega male crowd with you. And the reason I know I'm right is because I moved to where the evidence is, and the evidence says that even the most progressive women out there, the shrill Antifa, white privilege screaming, neurotic, exceeding. By the way, has anybody noticed how unhappy these people are? When your entire mission in life is to point out injustice, that's all you do. You, by definition, cannot be happy. If you're happy, then all of a sudden you're out of identity. These are the most miserable people in the world. But even these incredibly miserable, shallow, stupid young women admit that they find the beta males that do these kind of things, like Pajama Boy, they completely have no sexual interest in them whatsoever. You can only imagine my surprise. This is why P.J. O'Rourke did so much to bring me to conservatism, because P.J. O'Rourke wrote in the foreword of one of his books, he says, now I'm a Republican and, I get called a Nazi, and that's okay with me because I know in my heart of hearts that no woman ever had a fantasy of being tied up and ravaged by a man dressed like a liberal. And there you go. So anyway, I haven't seen the ad. I'll see it. I'll look at it, and I'm sure it's going to be fun. The further out these people get, the better it is for us. The further out these people go with this nonsense, the more people will realize that this is just plain insane. So anyway, so much for that. Let's see, moving on. I'm trying to approximately look at the upvotes. I can't really do it very scientifically because I'm moving on the fly here. But here's one with 13 votes, and that belongs to Ian A. Little. And he writes, Bill, I am going to invent a person, and your job is to win her over to our side. A 25-year-old white female, unmarried, unemployed, childless. She has a fine arts degree from a liberal college, is on food stamps. How would you do it? I think I'd just sit down and I'd just look her right in the eyes and say, how happy are you right now? Because you don't seem very happy, and as a matter of fact, you seem to be spending all of your time telling yourself that you're happy, and things like these affirmations and empowerment slogans and having a coffee cup that says that girls kick ass and all the rest of it. People who are happy, and I don't mean people who are mollified, I just mean people who are happy. I think that's the goal in life, right? Everybody should try to be as happy as they can. I think really that's my entire mission in life is to make sure that as many people get to be as happy as they possibly can. That's what life is ultimately. That's the reward for life. I'm not saying that being happy all the time is the way to get there, but happiness and satisfaction are why we're alive. So you don't strike me as a terribly happy person. And the reason I think that you're not a happy person is because people have lied to you for your entire life in order for you to vote for them so that they could get more money and more power. And they've told you a very, very large bushel of lies. And probably the one that you're suffering from the most is the lie that they've told you about how women can have it all. And before you get up and start defending this, let me simply say that no one has ever told a man that they can have it all. No one can have it all. No one can have it all. We're not saying that this idea of women having it all is a lie because we don't like women. We're saying it's a lie because it's not possible. It's not possible for anyone. No one can have it all. If your goal in life is to be a successful business person and crush the competition and walk through Wall Street with a steely-eyed glint and have people cower at your arrival, that is something you can do, and it's something you can do as a woman. But if you think you can do that and be a loving mom and have a happy family life, you can't, because the men that do that don't have a happy family life either. You don't get to have it all. You have to decide what you want. And so you have to decide what you want to be happy. And my experience has been that what people really mostly need to be happy is to find someone who covers their shortcomings. In other words, find somebody that you love and who's worthy of being loved, somebody who's good enough to be loved, and it has to be somebody that you respect. And you have to respect them no matter what they do. It doesn't matter if the woman makes more than the man, but it does matter that the man is out there working. Because if he's not working, if he's not doing anything, just sitting around on the couch, you don't respect him, and you can tell me all the time you want to that you do, but you don't. You don't respect him, he doesn't respect himself. So if the goal is to be happy, the question is, what do you want to be happy? You can argue with me about this if you want to, but I don't consider it to be an incredible advantage when I say that, as a general rule, men are not as dependent on emotional relationships as women are. You can say that's absolutely not true because I know a guy who's very emotional and I also know a woman who's very unemotional, and you've simply just proven I'm right because you can count the number of people like that on one hand. So what I'm saying is this: what is it that would make you happy? I can tell you what makes me happy as an individual human person, not as a conservative or as a male or anything. I'm happy that I met somebody who I respect and who I love because of the things that she does and the quality of the person that she is, and who loves me unconditionally, and there's nothing I can do that will destroy that, although God knows many times I've unintentionally seemed to manage to pull all of these off. I would say, and the reason that this makes me happy is because she is good at things that I'm not good at, and it frees me from burdens that are more than I can carry. And if you think you can carry all the burdens in the world and that you can be all of these things, and that any kind of a concession that this isn't the case is an admission of weakness or surrender, or you lose the argument, that's just an indication of how badly you've been lied to. Nobody can do it alone and be happy and be successful. So what are you looking for? And at this point, we can continue to play this kabuki game of what we should say, or we can cut to the truth, which you know is true and which I know is true. You're a 25-year-old woman, you're single, you're living on your own, you're doing all of these things by yourself, and you're proud of being able to do them, and you should be. But you are looking for someone who can provide emotional strength at a time when you are not emotionally strong. You need somebody who can provide financial assistance, because two can live about as cheaply as one, and it gets you from a world where you have to do all of these horrible, miserable things all the time to a world where you can actually enjoy life because you don't have to do all of the work anymore. Now you can do half of the work. This guy doesn't have to be a special forces guy. If you like a sensitive guy, if you want a guy who cries at movies, I cry at movies, and I'm a pretty damn good shot with my AR-15. They're not mutually exclusive. You see, you think they are, but they're not. And so you just have to understand that all of these conflicts in your life that are seemingly making you miserable, and yes, I know you're not miserable. No, I know you're absolutely happy. I know you live a totally contented life, absolutely no question about it. And you need a man like a fish needs a bicycle. I understand that, sure, for sure. So yeah, you got that out of the way. Congratulations, it's said, and I understand that I'm talking about other people, not you. But since you're so unhappy, you're unhappy because people who have given you your value set have given you an impossible set of values. And they've done it so that you would become dependent not on a man and not even on yourself, so that you would become dependent on them. You would become dependent on them. You would look to them for what you're supposed to think, how you're supposed to feel, what standards of beauty, what standards of success. You basically found them, and you have given all of your power over to them because you haven't heard anything else. But these people have lied to you, and they haven't lied to you for your own good. They lie to you because they need you to vote for them so that they can have money and power that they are not capable of having on their own. I would also say, if you think I'm wrong, think about this. There are two fully modern, equal people who are gender equal and have absolutely the same advantages and disadvantages, composed entirely of the same exact things. They're just 100% equal. The man and the woman, there's no difference between them whatsoever, just the biological differences, and otherwise they're absolutely the same. And they're two young people, they're your age, they're 25 years old, and they're living in an apartment together and so on. Okay. If you have a world where a spider this big appears in your bathroom drain, there are 3 different outcomes that can happen in terms of the reaction to that. 4. It's a quadrant. You can have the men be brave and the women be brave. You can have the man be brave and the woman be afraid. You can have the man be afraid and the woman be brave, or you can have the man be afraid and the woman be afraid. And you would tolerate 3 of those boxes. But the box you would not tolerate is the box where you're afraid, where you're not afraid and your boyfriend is. That'd be the end of it for you. That's the one quadrant you couldn't live in. You could live with a boyfriend who was as afraid of spiders as you are. And you could live with a boyfriend who wasn't afraid of spiders because you weren't afraid of spiders either. And you could also live with a boyfriend where you're afraid of spiders and he's not afraid of spiders. Those 3 boxes you can inhabit. But you cannot inhabit the box where he's terrified and forces you to be the tough guy. You can tell me whatever you want about this guy, and he may be a very, very good barista or run a great YouTube channel or whatever the case may be, but I will not believe, and I will not believe it because it is a fundamental truth, that you are not happy in a relationship where you are forced to be more physically brave than the man you're with. I know a lot of you are dating guys like that, but this is why you're miserable. This is not to say, see, this is the problem with cognition and the way you've been taught about things and how you don't learn how to think about things and can't really sort out what people are actually saying. This is not saying that you have to be weak. It's not saying that you have to be afraid of spiders. It's not saying that men can't be weak. It's not saying any of that stuff. It is saying that on balance, physical courage, generally speaking, and certainly the willingness to get dirty, generally speaking, historically resides in the male, and they are more likely to be able to deal with these kind of things that are unpleasant to women and also unpleasant to some men. I remember coming out of a supermarket before I met my wife 3-4 years ago, I guess, and this woman was just, she wasn't screaming, but she was making noises that sounded very much like screaming. And I went running over there because I wanted to make sure she was okay. And she was looking in the back seat of her car, and I thought, what is going on here? Is there a guy in there? Is somebody harassing her? And what happened is she had bought some firewood and put it in the back seat of her car. It was wrapped in plastic. And out of the firewood had crawled an insect that was this big. And that insect had then crawled up onto the back seat was up against the back window of this sedan. And she was looking at this insect, and she didn't know what to do. She didn't want to touch it, and she didn't want to drive off with the thing in the back of her car either. And she was just vapor locked. So I walked over and I said, "Is there a problem?" And she said, "This thing's in my car." And so I didn't have to go to the internet, and I didn't have to make a plan. I pretty much just went in there and reached in and picked this thing up gently and lifted it off of the back of the thing. And the thing starts crawling on your hand and puts its little hooks into your hands. And it's not a terribly pleasant, it's not like a super pleasant experience. It's not like, wow. But to whatever degree having an insect crawling on you makes you uncomfortable, it is a discomfort that I was certainly able to overcome. And I simply picked this bug up, and I took it out of the car, and I walked over to the bushes, which were 2 feet away. I wouldn't have done it if it was a mile away, but 2 feet away, and I put it on the bush, and I said, "Is there anything else I can do for you?" And she said, "No, thanks." So the reason I know I'm right, dear unidentified young 25-year-old progressive woman, is this. Men are scared of bugs. Some men are scared of bugs, and some women are not scared of bugs. But the way that things generally break out is, even if men are scared of bugs, they are more capable of going in and doing something that they don't like. It's unpleasant or whatever. They're more capable of it than women as a general rule. And the reason they're more capable of it is not because they're better people, but it's because they tend to be more simple-minded than women. They seem to be, and this is a lovely balance. Men seem to be much more focused on individual tasks and not connected everything to everything else, which you could certainly say is a very admirable quality that women have as a general rule. But because men have this ability, they're capable of doing these things, and you are not supposed to be unafraid of bugs. And most people that grow up in the suburbs or the city are also afraid of bugs. And there are men who will shriek at the sight of a bug, and there are women that will shriek at the sight of a bug. But the reason I'm right is because 99 times out of 100, if you have a couple living together in an apartment in Soho, and there's a cockroach the size of, a spray can or the size of an iPhone on the wall, if the man screams and the woman has to go and get that bug out of there, that is not as happy a relationship as it is if the woman screams and the man has to go and get it out of there. Because that second case is reacting more towards the biological bents that we both have, which are neither better or worse. They're simply different. And I would conclude this long, long speech by saying, I know that everything in your head is screaming at you that I'm wrong and all of it. But I also know that you know in your heart, and I know in my heart, and everybody else who's listening to us knows that I'm right. You won't admit that I'm right because that will destroy your entire worldview that's been foisted on you by bitter, angry, neurotic people. But you know I'm right, and I know I'm right, and they know I'm right. And you can argue all you want to. You're arguing to save your ego and your pride, but I'm right. And there we go. All right, moving on. Dean Gallagher, to a couple more, I think. Using the same climate data and science as the climate change community and accepting the premise that humans are producing CO2 and that this contributes to greenhouse warming of the planet, can you make the case that many of the extreme actions and policies pursued by alarmists are not necessary or helpful? This is a superb question because my complaint is this. My complaint is not that people are saying the climate is getting warmer. Whether it is or not, I don't know. It's certainly, without question, getting warmer in Southern California, and in a very short period of time. When I came here in 1988, starting in November, there would be snow on the Big Bear and the mountains up there, Mount Baldy and so on, and that would stay through February, and we would start skiing in November. And last year there was a day's worth of snow on the mountain, period, for one day during the entire winter. I remember when I got here in 1988, even a short time ago, I would come out to my car after a limousine driving shift at 1 or 2 in the morning in Pasadena, and there would be frost on my car every single evening. And I've not seen frost on my car in 15 or 20 years. Now, I'm not saying that that's caused by that, but I am saying that is definitely happening. There's no questioning about it. It seems that the winters in Russia are not as severe as they used to be, and so on. So far, so good. Where I get off the boat with you, and if I'm speaking to a climate scientist, I would say the part where you need to be ashamed of yourself is the part where you take what is something that might be of genuine concern, and because you have such low opinion of your fellow citizens and such contempt for people who simply would like to be proven something before they give up everything they have and turn all their money and freedom over to you. The thing you should be ashamed of is when you start saying things like, we have to save the planet. That's what you should be ashamed of. There are a generation now, an entire generation, hundreds of millions, probably billions, of younger people today who are convinced that if they do not throw their aluminum can in the recycle bin, that the earth will be destroyed, that everything on it will burn, and that if we don't give up our addiction to oil, it's only a matter of a few years before the planet burns to a cinder and then floods, and there is nothing left, and the planet is dead and destroyed. There is nothing that can destroy this planet. And when I say destroy it, I mean destroy all life on this planet. Anything big enough to cause an extinction level event is now big enough to have been seen. The bad news is there's still hundreds and thousands, probably hundreds of millions of Earth-crossing asteroids out there that we haven't seen yet. But the good news is that the more we look, we realize the ones that are getting by are smaller and smaller and smaller. It could be a bad day if it lands on your city, but it's not going to affect the planet. And that's the only real threat there is right now. I suppose a supernova eruption within a certain sphere could also be very bad. But that's not, somebody put gamma ray burst just as I said that. That could also be something catastrophic, but that's not something that we're talking about. It's not within our control under any circumstances. So when you start saying things to young people like saying we have to save the planet, you're lying. And even if you were to say we have to save the life on this planet, you're lying. If you're trying to say that we have to save human life on this planet, you're lying. You're lying because if it is in fact true that things are getting warmer and you say that people are going to die of heat stroke that didn't die before, that is true, but you're lying because the number of people who will not freeze to death is much greater than the number of people who would die from heat stroke. Much greater. So to say that all of these people are going to die who wouldn't have died otherwise is to lie. You're telling the truth to the degree that people will die in different areas, but more people will be alive as a result of the warming. And the part I'm trying to get at here is simply this. They are saying that if carbon dioxide left, it's been a while since I've done the numbers. Let's say it's 400 or approaching 400, 390 something right now, CO2 parts per million. And they're saying, off the top of my head, they're saying if it gets to 450, that's the end of life as we know it. That's a lie. And every single one of you knows it. Every single one of you knows that it's a lie because there has been millions and millions and millions and millions of years on this planet where the average mean temperature wasn't a centigrade degree higher, it was 20 centigrade degree higher. There's been a time when the CO2 levels on planet Earth were 3,000 parts per million. And you're telling us that the world's going to end if we go from 410 to 420? There have been 3,000 parts per million carbon dioxide levels historically in this planet many times. And those were not caused by humans. Now, this may be caused by humans. I'm willing to listen to the science on that. I'm willing to listen to the argument on that. But to tell me that this is something that we have to burn capitalism to the ground and give up everything that we've worked so hard for instead of using that technology to make whatever adjustments we need to. If you're telling me we have to give all of this stuff up because at 420 or 450 parts per million, the Earth simply goes extinct, you're lying. And you're lying by a large margin, because the planet has on its own had carbon dioxide levels that are 8 or 10 times what you are claiming is the maximum worst case scenario. And if you don't know that's true, you need to go back and take elementary ecology, elementary geological history. Kansas has been under 2 miles of water, and it's also been under 1 mile of ice. And we didn't have anything to do with that. Now, I'm not saying that I want to live under 1 mile of ice. I'm not saying I want to live under 2 miles of water. But what I am saying is there is nothing on the horizon. There's not the most wild, most extreme, most alarmist condition out there is talking about a sea level rise of 1 or 2 feet or a carbon dioxide push to 450, maybe 500 parts per million. There is no one talking about a 2-mile rise in sea level, and there is no one talking about carbon dioxide levels reaching 3,000 parts per million, and yet Earth has been a very comfy place in the middle of America. Instead of having these Kansas wheat fields of just essentially cold, flat ground with some grass growing in it, when those carbon dioxide and temperature levels were there, the entire middle of the United States was covered with an inland ocean, and it was teeming with life. There was life everywhere. There were flowers and plants and ferns, and there were little dinosaurs and big dinosaurs, and there were all kinds of things going on, and bugs flying everywhere. And if you had stood on the shores of Kansas 85 million years ago and then seen Kansas 85,000 years ago, you would have said, what the hell happened to all the living things, and what's this mile of ice doing here? And you'd be quite alarmed about that. And if you had seen Kansas when Kansas was filled with all of that tropical life and then saw Kansas today, you would think that a catastrophe has happened to Kansas. A catastrophe. This place used to be filled with living creatures, enormous, thousands, billions of them. They were flying through the air, and they're walking on the ground, and there's all these ferns and plants, and now it's just this wasteland of grass because carbon dioxide levels have fallen to such perilously low numbers as 150, 200, 300 parts per million. Don't treat us like we're children, okay? If you want to make a case, stop acting like you're the only people that understand this stuff or are capable of understanding it. And because of these lies and because of this rhetoric, I don't trust you. And I don't trust you because every time that we discover there's a revision that is made to take actual temperatures and adjust them to your model. And that's just plain not science, that's cheating. And if it turns out that your data is in fact as alarming and as consistent as you say it is, then why have we caught emails, and not just 1 or 2 emails, then why are there so many emails internally among East Anglia and NASA and all the rest of these data sets? Why are there so many emails saying that we have to tell this lie, like the hockey stick, for example? The hockey stick is a statistical invention. It is taking a graph like this, and cranking it 45 degrees so it's this. If you have the data, you don't have to lie about these things. If you have the data, you don't need to construct a hockey stick statistically. You can show actual temperature rise and have enough to get people's attention. The hubris of it is not, it's not just the hubris, it's when you talk about actual climate scientists. Look, I'm not a climate scientist, and I'm not one of these people that's saying there's nothing happening. I just don't know. But here are some things that I do know. These are some things that I do know because these things are just simple facts. When somebody says that 100,000 climate scientists agree on this data, what you're saying is 100,000 climate scientists have created computer models that agree on this data, but the data comes from 2 data sets. It comes from East Anglia and NOAA, maybe a third one. So you can make the argument there's 100,000 scientists who have come to the same conclusions, but there's 100,000 scientists who are basically building their theory on one set of data. And that set of data has constantly been adjusted and tweaked to match the model. They're not tweaking the model to match the data. They're tweaking the data to match the model. So I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced. And when you tell me the science is settled, the second you say something like that, I now instantly know that you're not a scientist, that you're a politician, that you're an activist. If you ever have the audacity to say that the science is settled, you should just shut up and trust the authorities. You've simply just announced in the loudest possible terms that you have no idea what science is whatsoever. The science is settled. Really. Well, guess what? It is possible for one person to devise an experiment that proves that everything you believe is wrong. And if that experiment can be reproduced around the planet with the same general numeric output, then that person has proved that the science is not settled. And every single advance that has ever happened in science has been a result of people who have not been willing to settle for the fact that the science was settled, that the science on the steady state universe was settled until it wasn't. And it was settled on any number of things until it wasn't. It was settled on Newtonian physics until it wasn't. It was settled on all of this stuff until it wasn't. So anybody who says that you should just shut up and listen to us and do what we say because the science is settled is not a scientist. They're an anti-scientist. And if your models are in fact that good, then why are you not able to do predictions? In other words, if you're able to do a 100-year prediction, why can't you do a 10-year prediction? And to the degree that you do 10-year predictions, as you did in 2005, your 10-year predictions were saying things like there will never be snow again by 2015. New York might be underneath a couple of inches of water by 2015. To the degree that you've made predictions based on your model over a time frame that we can live to see, your predictions have been pretty spectacularly wrong. Kind of amazingly spectacularly wrong. And you wonder why we're concerned about this? CP Tomes just put a link in the live feed to Burt Rutan on climate change. Burt Rutan, the fact that he's a personal friend of mine is obviously one of the highlights of my life. But Burt Rutan basically put this way. He said, Burt Rutan, as I've said on the show before, is an aeronautical engineer. Put aside the fact that he's a genius. He's simply just take him as an aeronautical engineer. He's a person who designs airplanes. And since he designs airplanes, what he does is he comes up with a plan. He creates an airfoil, creates a certain amount of surface area on the wing, comes up with a Reynolds number, comes up with the amount of thrust he's going to think he needs to get the weight of this up to a certain speed, and so on. That's what Burt Rutan does. And then when it turns out the airplanes don't do what Burt Rutan expected them to do, not exactly anyway, Burt Rutan does not throw up his hands and say, the science was settled, there's something wrong with the atmosphere, my plane's not flying. He understands that the entire process of this is, I'm going to give it my best shot, I'm going to get data, and the data is going to tell me where I'm wrong. And where I'm wrong, I'm going to make adjustments. Because the data, if the data is recorded accurately, never lies. If the data says one thing and I predict something else, and that data is routinely coming back reliably, then I'm wrong. And the data is not wrong. The data is never wrong if the data is reasonably accurately collected and reproducible across the spectrum of the world. So Burt Rutan has said about this climate change issue, about the death of the Earth issue anyway, Burt has said that there's nothing there. And people have responded to him by saying, well, you're not a climatologist. How do you know? Burt said, you're precisely right. I'm not a climatologist. I'm not creating the data, and I'm not gathering the data. I'm looking at your data, and I'm telling you from your data that what you're saying is just not there. Burt is a real interesting guy. He showed when he was, I want to say it was 2015, there was the anniversary of him first bringing the Very Easy. It might have been the 30th or 40th anniversary. I was honored enough and privileged enough to be there with him for that. And he showed some pictures from when that plane first came to Oshkosh, Wisconsin 30, 40 years ago. And Burt was a lot younger, but the mutton chops are still here, and they're looking good. And he's in great shape, and he's as sharp as he ever was. And he showed a couple of pictures of Oshkosh, Wisconsin. The air show has been held there pretty much the same time of year every year for half a century practically. And he shows pictures of them moving this aircraft through the fields at Oshkosh. And the fields at Oshkosh are brown. It's almost like Nevada. And Bert said, "Oh, and by the way, look at how barren Oshkosh was when carbon dioxide levels were at the perilously low level of 150 parts per million, which is what people are trying to get us back to." He said it was a wasteland. Now there's more carbon dioxide. Plants are growing. They need less water when there's more carbon dioxide. Oshkosh is a much nicer place than it used to be. So Bert Rutan's not one of these guys that's got his fingers in his ears and saying, this isn't happening. Bert Rutan's a guy who's saying, what you are claiming is not what's happening. And you're lying. So even if it is warming to the degree that they say it's warming, first of all, how is this a net loss? But much more importantly than that, it doesn't matter if Oshkosh is getting nicer. Forget that for a minute. It doesn't matter that the Earth is greener now than it's ever been. If you look at the Earth from space, it's greener than it's ever been because there's more carbon dioxide and plants need carbon dioxide to grow. There's no question that the carbon dioxide levels are higher and the place seems to be a better place. But that's part of the lie. Now, the thing of it is that it doesn't matter whether Oshkosh, Wisconsin is a nicer place or not a nicer place. What matters is that he knows, Bert knows, and the people that are ringing this bell know that the carbon dioxide levels that have existed on this earth are so far beyond anything that anyone is talking about that the whole argument is a lie. If they want to read, hey, how are you? We're good. Good. We're fine. Thank you. Right. Have a good night. If you want to come and make a case that this warming of the planet is real and will cause consequences, and here are the consequences based on a potential 2-centimeter rise in sea level or a 12-inch rise in sea level, and you want to talk to us about what will happen as a result of this, then I'm all happy to sit down and listen to this conversation. I'm perfectly happy. But if your model says that this is going to happen, this much is going to happen in 100 years, your model should be able to tell me what's going to happen in 10 or 20 years. In other words, if your model is going to crunch data that's going to get you to 100 years from now, you presumably have to go through the iterations necessary to get to 100 years from now. So what does the data say from your model that's going to happen 20 years from now? That'll give you a more accurate picture. Technically speaking, you should be able to tell you what's going to happen 5 years from now or 10. Shorter snapshot, not as reliable, but nevertheless, we should be able to do that. This isn't happening. And when you and here's when you begin to get a sense of why. They keep discovering things that they hadn't thought about before, and that makes their model better. And I'm all in favor of this. This is like Bert getting flight test data. He thought this was going to happen. Something slightly different happened. I'm going to make adjustments to my design because the atmosphere is always right, and now the plane will fly better. But they make these adjustments, significant adjustments, and they pretend like this. Well, now the model's better. Okay. So now the model's better, and the model still was very, very alarming. Yeah, but it's not as alarming, is it? No, it's not as alarming as it was, but it's still very alarming. So you've already admitted that there were elements to this perhaps most complex mathematical problem in the universe. Weather changes are so chaotic and they're subject to so many variables. Just the fact that you can make any kind of model at all is kind of impressive to me. If you can make a model that shows it's cooler at nighttime than it is in daytime, that'll impress me because it is an incredibly difficult thing to model. If you're telling me that you missed something, and now that you have something, your model has been modified, whether or not it makes the conclusion worse or not so bad is not as relevant as the fact that you have since discovered that there was some major element to this thing that you put together, to your train set, that you not only hadn't taken care of, but that you didn't know existed. So all of that is is relevant and bearing. But if you want to get to the motivation, strangely enough, the clearest example of the motivation doesn't come from the scientific community. In fact, it doesn't come from progressives at all. If you want to understand the motivation of the earth is dying and the so-called money trail, the best place to go is to go not to Berkeley or Antifa or Barack Obama or Al Gore. If you want to see what drives this, the best place to go is to any hotel in America, but let's just take, for the sake of the argument, let's just say a Best Western. If you go to a Best Western, let's go upscale a little bit, Marriott, let's say. You go to a Marriott anywhere in the country now, and you will arrive at the bathroom, and on the counter in the bathroom, you will see a card with some kind of green coloring on it and leaves. And the leaves and the card are sitting there right in front of you, and what the card will say is this: help save the planet. Okay, I live here. I'm in favor of saving the planet. So far, so good. Help save the planet. And then below that, you'll hear washing towels and daily changing sheets uses 4,000 gallons of water per day and dumps this much laundry detergent into the environment every day. So if it turns out that you want to save the planet and you don't want fresh towels every day, simply hang the towels up. If you do want a fresh towel every day, just leave the towel on the floor and we'll get you a new towel. But help save the planet, if you would, please, by doing this. And now you're on to the whole scam. Because whether or not you want a fresh towel is not going to affect the planet at all. What it will affect is it will affect the profitability of the hotel. It is obvious that if people do not have to have all of their towels washed every day, the hotel will save a significant amount of money in terms of the water costs, the electricity cost to wash it, the cost of having it replaced, and so on. If people are ready to have, and I'm perfectly willing to have a towel that, that unless I live in Florida when the towel's wet all the time, but in a general rule, if I use a towel in the morning, come back tomorrow morning, take a shower, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me that I have to have a fresh towel. My point is, if you're willing to do that, you're willing to save the hotel a significant amount of money, and that's in the interest of the hotel. And it's in your interest too. And the hotel doesn't trust you enough to simply tell you the truth. And the truth isn't, if you would like to save the planet, hang your wet towels up and we won't reuse them. That's not the truth. The truth is, if you would like to save money by making our operating costs cheaper, then please hang the towel up and we won't have to wash it again. And this is a perfectly, absolutely legitimate reason to do something that's not a great inconvenience anyway. But now you're down to the motivation, because it sounds more compelling for you to say, hey, if you would like to save the planet, do this, or else your children will die. That's a little more motivational than if you'd like to save $1.50 on your next stay at Marriott Hotel, please hang up the towels that you don't want washed that day. And so it is a clear-cut example of people who are willing to, you can't really accuse them of, well, you can accuse them of lying when you say save the planet. You can't really accuse them of lying when they say it's to the planet's ecological advantage to hang up your towels and not have them washed every day. On some level, on some microscopic level, that's true, but that's not why they're asking you to do it. They're asking you to do it to save them money and effort and time. And we talked about the cost, and there's also the cost of the employees that have to do the washing and so on. So why not just tell the truth? Listen, it costs a lot of money for us to wash these towels every day, and we can keep our rates lower and provide you with the same quality of service at lower rates if we can save some money. So now you're on to the motivation. As a sales tool, it's not as strong. And when you look at all of these green detergents and green this and green that and green this and green that, you'll see the same thing every time. I'm not saying Windex does this. I'm taking it off the top of my head. Hey, there's Windex. Windex is blue. But if you use green Windex uses 20% fewer planet-killing chemicals. So save the planet. and buy green Windex, which is slightly more expensive than other Windex. But we're saving the planet. You're saving the planet. The whole future of humanity is in your hands now in this decision that you make. And there you go. And if you've got a guy who's standing there and he's a climate scientist and he's saying, either you listen to me or else during the course of your life there will be a rise in sea level that is this high. So give me all of your money and stop arguing. And if you take that same guy, and let's assume he's telling the truth. Let's say that's exactly what the data says. And if the same guy were to say, having formerly said, if you don't give me all of your money and all of your power and shut up and let me run things, then in 100 years, the ocean will be this much higher. That is not as powerful an incentive as the same guy saying, if you don't give me all of your money and all of your power right now, then the planet is going to die. Life on Earth will be extinct. And you can ask people, young people, if they genuinely believe, do you really think that if we don't start doing things differently, all life on planet will become extinct? And 9 out of 10 of them will tell you yes. Yes. If we don't buy the green Windex and if we don't hang the towels up, the planet will be destroyed. There will be no Earth. There'll be no planet. There'll be no life on Earth. And that is a filthy, manipulative lie. So all I want is, I'm not trying to tell climate scientists what happened. I'm not trying to tell them that I know more about what is happening to data than they are. What I'm telling them is, I have not only a courtesy, but I have a right, and I will insist upon it as a member of the society that is run as a democratically elected republic, and as a citizen of that republic, I demand that you show me the actual data and treat me as if I'm capable of understanding it, because I am. And to the degree that you're not willing to teach me and tell me about things as actually are, and are determined to lie to me about consequences in order for you to get what you want, because you think I'm too stupid to understand it, me and the rest of the country, and therefore you're willing to lie in the interest of the common good, of course, in order to prevent this catastrophe, which isn't quite as severe as you say, but still is going to be pretty bad. So give me all your money and all your power. If you're telling me that I have to listen to you do this, and I have to give up on this, and just do what you say, the fact that I'm saying I'm not going to do that doesn't make me anti-science. It makes me anti-tyranny. It makes me anti-lie. It makes me anti-power grab. It makes me skeptical, which, to close this entire goat rodeo, skepticism is a term that is being applied to people who don't buy this argument hook, line, and sinker. They're called climate skeptics. And once again, when somebody says, oh, you obviously don't, you're not scientific, you're skeptical about this. Skepticism is the essence of science. Science runs on skepticism. Skepticism is the fuel that powers science. It's always been the fuel that powers science. It always will be the fuel that powers science. And to anybody who says that being a skeptic is something bad is not only not a scientist, they're an anti-scientist. Skepticism is the essence of science. Science runs on skepticism. I am skeptical about the fact that, the presumed fact, because Aristotle said it's true, that a heavy ball will hit the ground faster than a lighter ball. If I take a light ball and a heavy ball and drop them at the same time, Aristotle says that the heavy ball will hit the ground first. That obviously makes a lot of sense. Of course it makes sense. Well, I'm skeptical about that. How dare you? I'm skeptical about it. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm saying it might not be true. And because I'm skeptical about this idea that's been passed down for 3,000 years without anybody doing the kind of simple test that Galileo did, because I'm skeptical, I'd like some proof. So, if your theory is correct, Mr. Pseudoscience, go up to the top of yon tower there, take a big ball and a little ball, a heavy ball and a light one, and drop them at the same time, and we will be able to see the heavy ball hit the ground before the lighter ball does. And that's all I want. I want you to show me that what you're telling me is true. Do it. They won't do it. Because when they do it, they find, to your utter amazement, See, this is the thing. This is why this is such a great example. It seems absolutely intuitively true that a heavy object would fall faster than a light one. That is so intuitively correct. The idea that a light ball, and we're putting aside wind resistance, obviously, but wind resistance over a 100-foot drop with spheres this size is not a significant factor. If I take a bowling ball and a golf ball and I drop them from the same time, from the same height, they will hit the ground at the exact same time. And that does not seem to make sense. If I drop a feather and a hammer and I do it on the moon, they'll hit the ground at the same time too, because the feather falls light there. The feather takes longer to get down there, not because it's lighter, it's because it's got more air resistance. Take away the air, the feather and the hammer fall at the same rate. I've seen it done with my own eyes because they did it on the moon. So, I am skeptical. I'm skeptical about everything. If you want me to believe you on something like this, especially something that's counterintuitive as the ball's falling, then show me. And when Galileo makes a statement that seems ridiculous, no, a light object and a heavy object will fall at the same rate. Pfft, come on. Allow me to demonstrate. Up you go. I have conducted that experiment. I've conducted it on camera in Venice Beach 4 or 5 years ago and recorded people's reactions to it. And I have to tell you, when they first dropped the ball, we used a zip line on Venice Beach. And when they first dropped the heavy ball and the light ball and they hit the ground at the same time, I was quite amazed. I knew it was going to happen, but nevertheless, it's so counterintuitive that to see it with your own eyes is really quite a shock. It's quite an interesting experience. So that's pretty simple, really. By the way, for those of you who are still having problems with this heavy ball and light ball, I know that everybody here knows that this is true, and they know it's true now because I tell you it's true. They know it's true because they've seen the experiment conducted. And best of all, if you don't believe it, you can take a heavy object and a light object yourself and go to the top of a tall structure yourself and do the experiment yourself, and you will get the same answer, and then you will be convinced that this is in fact true because it's experimentally repeatable. But I had the hardest time understanding this. I really did. I had the hardest time understanding why this is true. And what I realized was, and this is just for your own edification, what I realized is that when something is falling, it doesn't weigh anything. The reason a heavy ball and a light ball hit the ground at the same time is because the definition of heavy and light is the resistance of an object, the force that the ground creates as this object is accelerated by gravity towards the center of the earth. The weight of something is determined by it pressing down on something else, scale, let's say, a bathroom scale. So a ball that's pressing down on a bathroom scale, the scale is resisting the acceleration of that ball, and the amount of that resistance, the amount of that force is measurable as weight. But if you take the scale away, that object doesn't have any weight, and it won't have any weight until it runs into something. And since the light ball and the heavy ball are both falling weightless, they weigh the same, which is nothing. They have no weight. They have mass, but they don't have weight. So, there you go. It's kind of cool. Once I understood that the reason they fall at the same rate is because while they're falling, a heavy ball and a light ball have the same weight, which is no weight. That really cleared it up for me. Really did. Really made it a lot easier for me. Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. They're falling at the same rate because they have the same weight, which is 0. If you decide to measure the impact, you will find that the heavy ball does considerably more damage than the light ball, which is why they shoot cannonballs at people instead of cantaloupes. But weight and mass are different things, and that's what this experiment proves. This experiment is, in fact, a perfect descriptor of what we feel to be true and is not true. Intuitively, we're wrong. And we're also shown by that experiment that there's a difference between weight and mass. And if you're really on the ball, if you'll pardon the expression, you will find that if you were to use an explosive charge to accelerate that ball faster than gravity would, if you had a cannon pointed it straight down and blasted it out of a cannon, you'll find that bowling ball will do more damage than the golf ball. But you could have found that out by dropping it. What you'll find is if you accelerate it more than gravity, it will do a lot more damage, and it will do damage in an increasing way, way out of scale to what you would expect to be the case. In other words, the faster you move it, the more damage it's going to do, even though the weight is the same. The mass is the same. Physics is fun, as Lord Bios says. And so here we are in a world where we weigh things. We weigh things because there's a floor to stop our acceleration towards the center of the planet. Michael Moore and Dr. Ruth weigh exactly the same thing if they are falling off of a mountain on the moon. They will hit the ground at the exact same rate. Michael Moore will make a bigger crater. But that's not counterintuitive at all. I think that will do it for this boy who needs to crank out a thumbnail or two and then go home to his lovely wife and get some sleep, because while Scott has been here, it's been a wonderful time, and he nevertheless gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning Texas time, which is 3 o'clock in the morning here, and I've had to try and match that to some degree. So exciting things going on, and I think that'll do it for this episode. So thank you very much for joining us for episode. Can somebody please tell me what it is? Is it 203? 204? I'm going to wait a few seconds until the answer comes in. It saves me the trouble of having to look it up myself. And I think we missed an episode in there somewhere. What number should I put on this thing? Somebody please. Is it? I can check it on YouTube. It's not a big deal, I guess. We're trying to bring Natasha things. By now the message is getting out there, and slowly people are rushing to their computers, and they're dashing to the YouTube site, which is something I'm too lazy to be doing, obviously. And I'll find out for myself. Damn it. This is episode. We need to timestamp this baby. So let me go to our YouTube. We'll go to Creator Studio. We'll go to Video Manager, and then we will scroll down. Once it comes up, 204 says Lord Bios. Looks like 204. This is the consensus opinion. Let's test it. And as I scroll down through the list of videos, 10 a week, which we put out here at BillWhittle.com with 2 people or 3, and Daily Wire has 75, by the way. I see that the last Stratosphere Lounge shot on January 2nd, 2019 was episode 203. That would make this episode 204. The science is settled on this, I think. Although, even though the science is settled, if you were to count the episodes, you'd find that there were 1 or 2 missing, so it's probably 206 if you were to get down to the actual number, something like that. But nevertheless, it's going down as 204, whether you like it or not. That will do it for this edition of the Stratosphere Lounge, brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. And for those of you that are members, we're very grateful. For those of you that write me quite often saying that they've had to cancel their membership due to financial hardships, believe me when I say that I am extremely grateful for the support you've given me. And if anybody on this planet understands financial hardship, it's me. So thanks for doing what you do and for how much you do. And as I said at the beginning of the show, when we handed out those donation envelopes, and some woman put in $3. And $3 is by far the most generous donation anyone has ever made to any cause that I'm a part of. I consider that person to be extraordinarily generous. Because if you put $3 in an envelope, that's impressive to me anyway. All right, so that'll do it. Thanks. So we're going to turn off the, here's what's interesting. We're going to turn off what used to be the YouTube channel, but now is the backup channel. So stick around. We're going to turn off the backup. So long, YouTube fans. See ya. Great talking to you. Have a nice time. We'll see you next week. Bye. I never liked them. But I'm still recording here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this, and then I'm going to stop the recording